With the start of Season 2, I've been playing an awful lot of Teamfight Tactics lately. I really enjoy the changes that Riot has made to the game for Season 2, and I'm having a blast. As such, I thought I would make a series of videos at least covering the builds that I'm finding successful, the ones I'm having fun with. I also want to talk about potential substitutions or just general tips or item choices, things like that for the builds throughout the video. And to kick things off, we're going to go with one that, if you played Teamfight Tactics at all this season, you've probably ran into it. This is a 3 mage, 3 summoner build. Now, I will say mages are kind of popular. They're everywhere. And there's like 3 or 4 different ways you can build it. And I might do separate videos on the other builds. I likely won't do a video on 6 mages because that one's really straightforward. Here's your summary for 6 mages if you're curious about that build. You play all 6 mages and you add Thresh and Nautilus. Boom, there you go. All right. So 3 mage, 3 summoner. Why choose this over, say, 6 mages? Well, in my opinion, this is actually more consistent, which might seem a little bit weird because when you go to 6 mages, you guarantee your double cast. But with something like this, you get more consistent damage because the summoners provide some better utility. They're a little bit better early game in terms of having the Zyra available, but also you get that tier 1 of the Inferno, and that is a pretty consistent source of damage. So this is the core 8. As I make these videos, I'm likely going to stick to a core of 8 units or less. And the reason for that is because it's just far more common for you to hit level 8 than it is for you to hit level 9, and there's no guarantee that you're going to get a force, for example. So 8 or less is where I'm going to try to target my builds, if you will. Now, this is a pretty specific build, and you want to try to target, in my opinion, this 8 as much as possible, but there are some potential substitutions. Now, the reason that this 8 is important is because on the mage side of things, by including Syndra and including Vladimir, you get an extra tier of Ocean because this Thresh and Nautilus gives you another tier. You also want to include Zyra and Annie as 2 of your 3 summoners because them combined with Brand is what gives you your Inferno. And if I'm being honest, that's the real attraction to this, is you're getting a really good bonus, in my opinion, in the tier 1 of Summoner and the tier 1 of Inferno that's going to offset not always double casting. And it just ends up, it sounds weird, but it just ends up being far more consistent that way. And if you're going to go with these 2, the next best summoner in the game, just period, is Yorick. Yorick is outstanding as just a standalone unit. It is even better in a summoner build. This is a great place to use it. Now, in a pinch, if you haven't found Yorick, or you're just trying to get something online a little bit sooner and you're doing some mix and matching before you hit level 8, you can use other summoners, but Yorick is where you want to end up because this particular set, like I said, just gives you access to your best set of synergies and your best set of units. Now, substitutions. Some of you might be tempted to fall for a trap, and that trap is Viger and Malzahar. So theoretically, if you break Ocean, meaning you're not going to be using, in all likelihood, Syndra or Vlad to add in add in Viger, and then you're going to likely be losing Yorick because you need these for the Inferno to add Malzahar. You do gain Shadow, but you go down Ocean just to tier 1 and you lose Yorick. I do not think that that is worth the payoff. The only time that works out, in my opinion, is if you can 3-star Viger, and then that's putting a heavy commitment into Viger, and that also means you're likely putting your items on Viger and not on Brand, and I just think that's a mistake. So try not to fall for that trap. Now, items are an important piece of any Teamfight Tactics build, and you can see that I've got some on Brand. These are my favorite ones personally to try to put on Brand, but they're not the only, items that you can use. Morello's is fantastic. So the reason that Morello's is amazing specifically on Brand is that it gives you the healing debuff and it gives him an extra burn or an extra source of damage on units. So if I mouse over this here real quick, basically your spells deal burn damage equal to the enemy's maximum health, but it also reduces the healing they receive. And that is very, very important. It's just one of the best items, in my opinion, you can put on Brand for this build. Now, the other items are just about either increasing his burst or trying to get him to cast more than once. Your goal, in my opinion, is to try to get Brand to get 2 of his abilities off. I think Spear is the best way to do that. Now, potential substitutions or other ways you can help him cast faster would be items like Rage Blade, because that's going to increase his attack speed, and the way that they generate mana is through auto attacks. That's why the Spear works so well. Obviously, the Ocean trait helps him cast faster as well. That's why that's so important to include. But Rage Blade is another way to get it done. Seraphs is another way to help him cast faster, at least going for the second one, just like Spear. And you can also include items, while not great on Brand, but if you just don't have access to Spear or the way the drops go, items like Static Shiv, for example, because that still increases your attack speed, so you're charging your mana faster. And then because Shiv also includes a tier, you're going to start with more mana, which means you're going to get to your first cast that much faster. Rabbidan's Death Cap is, again, just there to kind of increase the burst and overall damage. Another great item, if you don't have a Death Cap that you can include, would be something like the Jeweled Gauntlet, so that your spells can crit. And those are kind of the ways you want to build Brand. Brand is definitely your carry in this particular build, but there is one other item I wanted to highlight, and if you're kind of cheating or paying attention, you'll see it over here. That is the Mage's Cap, and you'll see that I have that kind of pseudo placed on Zyra for this example, and I want to talk about that as well. If you get a Mage's Cap, then you can turn one of your summoners into a mage, allowing them to double cast. Now, all of these summoners are great choices. If you get Yorick double casting, and he's making multiple units, then awesome. But I think that it's not great on him because you're waiting for somebody to die before you get the benefits. And then it comes down to Annie or Zyra. Now, as of recording this, if you have a double casting Annie, she does create 2 Tibbers. 2 Tibbers is insane, can sometimes just win you a fight by itself. However, you get that double cast once, and then that's it. She's really only going to cast Tibbers once a fight, and that's all. That's the only shot you got. Now, in this particular build, because it's only a 50-50 chance of the double cast, if she does not hit that double Tibbers, then your Mage's Cap kind of did nothing for that one fight, and that's just not something that I feel good about, right? Everything in Teamfight Tactics, in my opinion, is about consistency. Yes, you can get these crazy power spikes, and sometimes you can steal wins as a result, but if you're trying to consistently be in the top 4, consistently place high, then you also want to fight the randomness with consistency, and that's why if you do end up with a Mage's Cap, I think Zyra is the way to go. It's even more so amazing if you can get yourself to a 3-star Zyra, then she is absolutely bonkers with a Mage's Cap. But the idea of putting it on Zyra as opposed to the other 2 summoners is just simply, it's on somebody who's going to be triggering Inferno, and that's very helpful. It's on somebody who will hopefully get at least 2 casts off per fight, and if she gets the 2 casts off, then that is going to net average you 1 double cast per fight. Totally worth it. And if she survives and goes really long, then she can kind of just cover the board with a bunch of her vines. And if you've ever seen a double casting Zyra in action, you'll know exactly what it looks like. You don't forget that feeling of viney goodness all over the board. So I really just feel like with her being an Inferno unit who can cast multiple times, she's the right unit to put that Mage's Cap on. And that's pretty much it. So like other items that might help you out, defensive items, you want to go on your front line if you do end up with defensive items, but again, you kind of want to look for your offensive stuff and try to turn Brand into your carry. He's definitely the unit that is going to be most valuable in this build because of everything he does. Triggers the Inferno, potentially double casts, just does a lot of damage. He was bonkers pre-nerf, and after the adjustment he is still very, very, very good, and it's basically the entire point of this build. So this is 3 mage, 3 summoner. Tomorrow I'm going to talk about another variant. I know briefly in this video I mentioned the 6 mage build, and that's really straightforward, so I'm not going to do a video on that, but there is a different variant of 3 mages where instead you focus on the 3 mage kind of like burst ability, and then it's defensive units. It's something that includes like Malphite, for example, and you'll get to see that one tomorrow. So if this isn't your kind of build, then maybe tomorrow's video will help out with that. And I do want to talk about weaknesses. That was another thing I wanted to talk about in these videos. So potential weaknesses. With this build, some of your best damage dealers don't come until tier 4. So Brand is a tier 4 unit, Annie is a tier 4 unit, and Yorick is a tier 4 unit. So if you do not get a strong early game, you can fall behind pretty quickly. If you don't find a Thresh and a Nautilus early, you can fall behind quickly because you have no front line, essentially, without those two. And you might want to actually start with a different build and transition into this as a result. So while this is your endgame target, it's entirely common, for example, to begin the game with like Woodland, for example. So if you can get a Maokai and an Ivern, and then, you know, LeBlanc is usually the go-to because that's a stand-in mage for you until you can get to Brand. You can start with like Maokai, Ivern, LeBlanc, Vlad, and Syndra as your starting 5, if you will, and then use those to just stem the bleeding. Like, you can win with those. If you get good rolls, for example, you can certainly win fights with those and maybe even go on a win streak. But even if they end up not being that great, you can use those to just make it so that you're not taking so much damage in the early to mid game until you can transition into finding your better pieces, because that is a weakness of this build. Brand, Annie, and Yorick are all tier 4 units. Traditionally, if I'm trying to target this build, then I will try to level up pretty aggressively till I can get till at least 6 or 7 so that I can increase my chances of finding them. And then once I've got some pieces, I'll make the final jump to 8 when I get like the last slot. But that is a potential weakness. Another potential weakness is because everything in here that is damage based is entirely based on your spells, right? You don't have like a good attack damage carry in this build. Running up against an opposing poison build or an opposing glacial build, or heavens forbid a poison glacial build, and that's something I like to build, and I'll talk about that later this week as well. That can sometimes cause this fits as well. The real key is going to be whether or not you can protect your back line in those scenarios, because if they can delay Brand and Annie from casting or just stun them and then nuke them, you kind of just lose those fights. So you got to keep your eye out for those as well. But anyway, this is the build. Those are the weaknesses, and I've been rambling for a bit now, so I think I'm going to wrap this one up now and try to tighten up how I finished this last one. I forgot the weaknesses part, so sorry about that, gang. But anyway, more videos coming this week. Hopefully this helps you or at least inspires you, and if not, don't worry, I got some more builds coming your way. So if you made it this far, thanks for watching, and don't forget to have fun when you're playing the game, and I hope to catch you watching future videos.